Hello, everybody. Today we are talking about self-taught artists' mistakes. Welcome to Art Prof. This is our global art party. Self-taught artists, tell us in the comment if you are here, because there are so many people who teach themselves how to be artists. And Jordan, as a child of the 80s, I think it's amazing what people can learn on their own.
Yeah, I think that honestly, most artists have to be self-taught in some form. Like even after going to school, I realized I had to relearn a lot of the stuff that my teachers presented to me, and I've either had to go through books or just kind of discover stuff on my own. So in a way, I almost think that all artists really are self-taught, but it depends on how much guiding that you get during that time as well. That determines how self-taught you are.
I feel that I am a self-taught artist in some ways because I learned video production and editing entirely on my own. I never took a class. I didn't do a degree in any of those areas. My feeling is that you sort of have to be a self-taught artist in certain areas because things like technology change, software changes, it's not really something that people don't do if they
Mhm.
work in the arts. And I think people don't realize that because oftentimes we define self-taught as somebody who has zero formal training. But I don't think it's that black and white whether you're self-taught.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be black and white like that either. You Everyone has to learn a certain set of skills, and it's much faster if you get someone to help you. Like perspective is often a very challenging task for many people, but if you can get someone to help you get that done, then sure, that's great. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that you're not self-taught or that you're not figuring a lot of these things out by yourself.
Mistake number one, never getting feedback. Tell us in the comments, have you gotten feedback on your artwork and where did you get it? Because feedback, I think, is one of the toughest things to get as a self-taught artist. What do you think is the issue with not getting any response to what you're making?
Um, well, is this when you're seeking response and not getting it, or when you just don't seek out any
Both.
feedback at all? Both? Okay. So if you are not even seeking out feedback, I'll just start with that. I think it's going to be much more challenging for an artist because it's often common to repeat mistakes without someone pointing out things to you. Like if you're trying to cook a meal and you're constantly putting in the wrong ingredient and it comes out disgusting, but no one tells you, you're just going to keep making the same mistake over and over again. And it's the same with art. So when you actually go and ask for feedback, that's what you're hoping for, is for someone to guide you in the right direction. Now, uh, if you're asking for feedback, if you're being active there and no one's responding, then clearly those people don't care enough about your artistic growth. And I would just go somewhere else, like the Art Prof Discord, for example, where tons of people are on there willing to give feedback for your work and are able to guide you in your path to artistic growth.
Yes, and if you want a critique from staff and me, I give critiques that are audio recordings. We also have Art Club, which is probably, in my opinion, the biggest bang for your buck out of everything that we offer. And I think for the longest time, there were no options for where you could get professional feedback without it costing an arm and a leg in terms of enrolling into a university program. But the main issue that I see is people inevitably, you get frustrated. You don't understand something or you get stuck. You're working on a painting, you have no idea what to do next. You know it's not finished, but you cannot identify what it is. And I found when I get in that spot, if I ask somebody for feedback, I asked Kat and Mia ways back to help me with an illustration. In 2 minutes, we identified what I needed to do. It's like, boom, instant answer. And so I know it's intimidating to get feedback, but isn't that just awesome? Like, instead of banging my head against the wall, trying to search it on YouTube, spending hours looking for an answer, you just ask somebody, you get the answer.
Mhm. And even on that point, I recommend asking people who you know you can respond to in a positive way, even if, because there are some people who communicate messages that are just not conducive to you, and you get frustrated and or confused. Try to avoid those people because it's only going to make you more frustrated. Go with people who know what you're trying to go for, who care about your growth, and you can and maybe even have a good friendship or relationship in that way.
Optic Nerve says you can't get feedback if you don't put your work out there. Now, an addendum I would add to that, you have to find the right space to get feedback, because social media is not a great place, because it's not a learning environment. It's just to show and to share. But in our Discord, for example, our Discord is a learning environment. We're there to educate you on various things, and we are very much invested in your success. Some people don't want you to succeed, unfortunately. And I think it is tricky. And I know it's nerve-wracking to put your work out there. So what advice would you give for people who really want feedback, but you're just like really nervous about it?
I think one quote that has always stuck with me, I can't remember who said it, but the quote is, every artist was first an amateur. And so all the people that we look up to in whatever industry, whether it's art, music, sports, they at first missed shots. They had a lot of failures. And I think recognizing that and being humble and recognizing that we can't figure it all out by ourselves, then that I think is the perfect breeding ground to entice someone to want to share their work and just realize that it's part of the process. Everyone needs growth.
Here's another thing. Tell us in the comments if you've only really had family and friends to get feedback from. But as Alexander says, they never had a bad word to say. I never knew if they meant it or if it was really good. I say don't ask them because unless your parents are like professional artists, it's not a good idea, because number one, they're not experts in the field. And number two, it's true. It's like it's too much stuff like complicating that relationship, which I think is not a good experience. Number two, studying from only one artist. There are so many YouTube channels out there. There are books and things like that. But I always tell people, listen, if you really like us, that's awesome. I love it. But don't just look at our channel. Look at other channels as well. Why?
Well, I think it's just going to be learning in a silo. It means that you're going to basically be a carbon copy of whoever you look at. And so if you're only looking at one artist, then you're just going to be an exact duplicate. Most of the greats study like 12 or more people. They'll take a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. And that's actually how people create their own styles. It's not just because it comes out of thin air, it comes from their various sources of inspiration. So I always recommend studying as many artists as possible.
Which can be confusing sometimes because you'll hear opposing advice on different channels. However, I think it's important to hear conflicting advice, because then you look at the two things and you say, okay, which way is a good fit for me? Because you really don't know until you've tried both and you realize, oh, that was not good for me. Oh, I really like this. It's confusing, but I think it's necessary to hear multiple points of view, because the other thing I see too with a lot of YouTube channels is a lot of artists will teach you to draw like them, to draw in their style. And I want you guys to formulate your own vision, which is 10 times more work teaching, but ultimately makes the work yours.
Mm-hmm. You know, speaking of that, one of the funniest things to me is how different our approaches to figure drawing are. I mean, back in the day, it was one thing, like when I was your student, but now we're like on complete opposite
I
sides.
know.
And so there have been times where people go like, Clara told me this, but Jordan, what do you think? And I say the exact opposite and just like figure it out.
Selena says, when I was young, I knew feedback was important, but I really just praise, not critique. Sometimes that's where you need to start, so you don't feel like it's putting a spotlight on your work. And that's why in our Discord, we have channels like, for example, the Show and Tell channel is a really great channel to start in because people just post one artwork, one photo per day. That's the limit. And you'll see people do give wonderful comments, but they're not critiques. So if you're worried about sharing your work, this is a really great place to start because people feel that it is not high pressure to do anything specific. Artie String says, close friends with my high school art teacher. She gives great feedback. Absolutely. When you and your professor become colleagues, it's a wonderful experience. And AA says, parents don't like that much my work, don't understand, but I know it is not that bad what I do. They think it will be better with some courses. How do you know when to ask for feedback? Because oftentimes people assume a critique is only helpful on a finished painting. But I disagree. I actually think it's way more productive and efficient to get feedback early.
I think once you realize you're outside your element, when you get that sense, then that's when you should ask for feedback. So let's say you're working on a piece that has really complicated lighting and you don't understand where the direction needs to come from or how it should affect certain objects. I think at that point you should ask that question. Or if you're not sure if the color matches or if the design is not clear, I think as soon as you feel a little bit of confusion, that's when you need to figure out, how do I formulate this into a question, and then ask someone who is either unbiased or is more experienced and can help you with that.
If you're doing a still life painting, I tell people, show me your setup before you start drawing, because most of the time the issue in a still life, why people struggle, is because they have a bad setup. If you have a still life setup and, oh, it's got great colors and stuff like that, but you have no lighting, everything looks super flat, it doesn't matter how good of an artist you are because you're shooting yourself in the foot from the get-go. And by the way, we have a comment here from Sonnet who says, congratulations, Jordan, on the engagement. In case you all missed it, Jordan is getting married. What, in 3 weeks?
Less than now, or 20 days away. Thank you so much.
If you guys want to look at Jordan and Kathy's wedding website, that is in the description. And also, if you would like me, while I'm going to Jordan's wedding, to shoot at Los Angeles museums. As you guys know, I have been able to worm my way into several museums and show all of you things that are not open to the public. So if you would like to give us a super chat, super sticker, we also have PayPal and Venmo in the video description below, because I would love to be able to spend few more days past the wedding if I possibly can. And this is also going to be the first time that a lot of our staff are going to be meeting each other in person. So we're very excited.
It's true. Yes, there's several people I still haven't met. I'm excited.
I know, it's really amazing. Mistake number 3, skipping the basics. What I hear all the time, people say, oh, that's so boring. I don't want to learn the basics. And there's this common perception that the basics are not interesting. So how do we change everybody's mind? Because I think they're exciting, but a lot of people groan at the idea of doing that.
I think the basics are the basics because they are the building blocks for everything exciting that you want to do. So someone will look at a really cool piece of finished concept art for a movie. Like I was at Barnes and Noble the other day, and I saw the art books of all these MCU movies, like Iron Man, the Avengers, the What If series, all this stuff. And every single one of them had perspective, had anatomy, had volume, had lighting, had color. Like all those things are what makes those really, really exciting. And I think, I think because it's expected of us to do basics, it has become boring. But if you can change your mindset, then I think it's really valuable. It's sort of like it's like Mr. Miyagi training, right? To use my Karate Kid / Cobra Kai references, right? It's all the wax on, wax off, paint the fence, but it turned LaRusso into a karate master. It's the same kind of format.
when I was in high school, I was a hardcore volleyball player. I wasn't super serious. I wasn't like an athlete, but I played varsity and I used to go to volleyball camp. So that's pretty dorky in my opinion. I remember my coach, he would always bother us about strength training. He'd say, listen, you guys need to be lifting weights. We never did because I was busy doing a million other things and it wasn't 100% my focus. But if I had done strength training, I really think it would have resolved a lot of the issues that I had when I actually was playing the game. And so those exercises, push-ups, running laps, I mean, what athlete doesn't do that?
I mean, not good. It's not ones that want to be in it for the long haul, I guess. I was similar. I didn't want to do that conditioning training because it was hard, and I never really cared about that stuff anyway. So it changed things for me.
Alexander says basics are the foundation of all your work. If you ignore those, then your work will not stand and fall flat like a badly built house. Exactly. It just gives you a nice, stable ground. So you feel that you are anchored in hard skills to help you. And if you don't know what the basics are, guess what? We have a basics curriculum, which is on our website. Our recommendation would be to go into the search bar and just put in curriculum. Well, you want to put in basics curriculum like this, because certainly you can browse our site, but if you're looking for that one page, that's the best way to look at our website. And we really give you everything. This is part one, sketchbook, drawing from a mirror, thumbnail sketches, brainstorming. Part two, art history, master copies, 2D composition. Part three, elements of art, color theory, critique. It's all here. Just get started with this so that you just know, okay, where are the things that I don't really understand? And sometimes the basics are not obvious. Like a lot of people, I'll talk to them about composition. And that's sometimes the very first time anyone has ever talked to them about composition. So there's a lot of basics and terminology that people just don't know.
And I think it'll also help when you are preparing to critique for someone else, because if you know these different terms, if you understand the difference between like line or light and value or different things like that, it'll give you a stronger footing for when you're trying to help someone who's trying to learn.
Sarah says, I never really started with any of the basics. Now, every time I go back to them, I think my art style changes drastically. Another thing I would recommend is you don't have to do this thing where you say, I'm not allowed to do character design until I go through the entire basics curriculum. You switch it up. You can say, you know what, my thinking is long term, I'm going to do character design. I'm going to do some basics. Other days I'll do character design because I know how much you like characters.
I do. I do very much. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, if you do the same thing over and over and over again, I mean, yes, you will get good, but sometimes it gets a little boring, and sometimes you just want variety. And there's nothing wrong with doing a practice version and seeing what you of a design and seeing what you learn. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
We have multiple curriculums. So once you have gone through the basics curriculum, you guys can take a look at some of the other topics. And it's just really important to have that overview. So that way you're not missing out on anything. Tell us in the comments if you consider yourself to be a self-taught artist, or maybe if you want to name some media or some skills that you had to teach yourself, because I think we all have something in there. All right, mistake number 4 is expecting fast and or great results. Why is this a big problem for a lot of people?
I think, well, one, I think it's a big problem because we just happen to live in a generation where we expect results very quickly. You know, even something as simple as waiting for a movie to come out of theaters to home has changed from years to months to now it's just days. Like sometimes it's actually at the same time, like you can get it at home and watch in theater at the same time. So I think this actually is probably what prevents most people from becoming great artists, is because it takes too long. And art is a skill. It's something that you have to develop over a period of time. You have to try things out. You have to be willing to fail a lot. You have to be willing to learn a lot. You have to be willing to put down your pride and ego a lot. And it sometimes becomes overwhelming for people and they just stop. So my my advice for you all is to expect nothing when it comes to this. Just do what you can for the day, and then the next day try and do 1% better. That's all you can really do.
I think with art, sometimes there's the perception about talent. Either you have it or you don't. I don't think that's true at all. And this is a great point from Alexandria. I recognize that talent needs skill, and skill is learned, not gift of nature. Anybody who tells you, oh, you got to have talent, that's such a load of crap, because the talent doesn't get you anywhere if you don't work hard. And I've seen people who worked so hard and were not the most skilled people in the beginning, but who did extremely well because they were patient and they were very dedicated. I also think there's something along those lines where people think, well, they're talented, so it wasn't hard for them to make progress. But guess what? It's hard for everybody. Like nobody, regardless of who they are, gets great results.
Yeah. I think of talent as being like, if it's a race, let's say, talent is giving you like 2 or 3 steps above someone, or in front of someone, but it doesn't mean they're going to finish the race first. It just, usually the people who are hardworking and who are diligent are often better than the ones who are talented later on, because there's certain there's a certain mindset and character development that happens just from simply putting in the hard work than usually people who rely on their laurels and their pure talent that was given to them at birth. So I think understanding that difference is really key.
Janice says, I think basics seem boring because they're hard and you don't see results right away. Everyone wants to start out doing masterpieces. I've worked with a lot of people in our workshops, and sometimes I'll ask them, well, why are you feeling like you want to start over? And you've only worked on it for 20 minutes. And they say, because I want it to look good. I'm like, no, it's just your work is going to look pretty bad for a long time. The other thing I see, Jordan, is people say, oh, I'm so upset because the drawings I did yesterday, they're better than the ones I did today. And you cannot measure your progress in terms of days because you'll always be frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it this way, like think of it like a toddler or a baby who's just learning how to walk. You don't expect them to like take a step one day and then the next day there's somebody learning how to walk around the block. Like or to not expect them to fall. Like if you ever look at babies walk, they can't do it very well. They just they struggle. So I think if you approach it with that mindset with art, you might have a really good drawing one day and it might not be as good the next day. And the other thing to consider also is it may not even be that you're worse off. Maybe your eye has improved and you can see mistakes more clearly because you put in that extra practice. So it might not be that you're actually worse off. It could be that your mental capacity of what is good has gotten higher.
We also have a comment here from, sorry, brain fart, optic nerve. Fast and great are two different things. Absolutely. I think you might be talking about impatience, though. Yes. I think the whole world needs more patience and to let things marinate. Because even if I understand something initially, like shape, I understand shapes, circles, squares, triangles, but to learn how shape is a tool to compose something, you're not going to learn that overnight.
I actually find that some of the simplest things are most difficult to learn. Like there's like different proverbs, different examples of ancient writings that are very simple principles that in saying it, even like if 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds can understand it, but applying them to real life can be the most challenging. So it's the same. It's the same thing here.
Number 5, working in only one art media. You're such a great example, Jordan, because you're strong in digital and traditional. However, your primary work is all digital, and yet you still insist on the pencil. Why is that?
I think I think working with pencil gives me something real and tactile to work with, and it makes it feel more connected to my work. And I also think that working purely digitally, while it has many benefits, there is something that is lost. Like there's not the same speed because I'm so worried about zooming in. I'm worried about the pixels. I'm worried about this and that, and it just doesn't come out quite the same. I actually know people who are incredibly fast, who draw incredibly fast, but they prefer to draw their line art for like a comic traditionally because they just have more trust in the pencil than the digital software, even though you could fix all the mistakes in the world digitally. So, and again, this is just the way I go about it, but I think that there's a tactility that digital does not possess.
Good comment from Butter. It'd be unfair to say I'm self-taught. I've learned so much from Art Prof, not just from the lessons, but also from the community interaction. Yes, we are the whole package, you guys. We give you everything, one-stop shopping, and you'll see that on our website that we do have an extremely broad range of materials. We've got 3D stuff. We also have, for example, an animation area. You can go to the printmaking area. And then within painting and drawing, we also have divisions between mixable oils, gouache, and acrylic. We are frequently accused of having too many new things for people to get excited about. However, I think that's what you need to do in the very beginning is just sample things because you probably did a lot of things in art school, Jordan, that you're never going to use again. But I
Yeah.
think those experiences are still valuable.
Yeah, actually, I'll even go back further. When I was a kid, like a toddler, my mom, she would set out a tarp on our dining room table and put a bunch of arts and crafts supplies. She would put crayons, papers, construction paper. Like the only thing I couldn't use was the hot glue gun by myself. That was the only thing. But everything else I had access to, and she didn't know what it would become, but it really helped me to get a sense of what I liked, and I eventually gravitated towards drawing, but that was very valuable for me, even though I haven't touched construction paper and glue guns in a long time. Still find that very valuable and very memorable.
Sonnet says, babies have to learn the basics too. My baby is currently in the push-up phase. She's preparing for crawling to eventually coasting and then finally walking. Oh, it's a long haul for babies to learn, but they get there. Eventually, you are able to walk without falling on your face every 30 seconds. And learning is hard. I just think people underestimate how much work it takes to learn something. Sometimes being the professor all the time, I forget how hard learning is and how awkward it is. So when I do sit down to try to learn something, I'm like, oh, this hurts my head. But it does get better.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a common thing I notice with some teachers, and even myself occasionally, where I'm like, how come you don't just get this? And it's like, no, they're starting from ground zero. I have to constantly remember that as I'm going.
Marielle says, it was so helpful to try a bunch of stuff at friends' homes or purchasing a couple things to try out. I started watercolor by stealing my granddad's. Sometimes it's just, oh, this happens to be around, and that's awesome. However, it works for you. Okay, the next mistake, focusing on limited subjects. For example, I know you love characters and drawing them more than anything, Jordan. However, that's not the only thing you draw. Why?
And because the word that's here, limiting, it's kind of tough when you're in a situation where you don't have anything else to build off of. If you're stuck only knowing one thing, then what happens when you want to try something else? You're not going to be able to go anywhere. And so uh, I think I think art thrives on variety. I think it's always nice when you see someone who is able to do this mood for painting, or this style of work, or this interesting story. And that to me is really exciting. So when you don't have any of that type of variety, or to expect that for 50, 60 years of your artistic life, you're going to be doing the same exact thing is pretty unrealistic to me. So I recommend doing a lot of different things, or at least dipping your toe and seeing what you like.
I think when you teach yourself to use many different subjects, I find it very empowering because I will oftentimes with anatomy, people will say, well, I'm really good at drawing female figures, but I can't draw male figures. That's a big limitation. If you have a whole other gender you're not able to draw, that's not a great thing. And I've drawn enough things in my life now that if somebody says, draw this cathedral, I'm like, okay, it's not a big deal. But I think if you just teach yourself to draw people and then all of a sudden you have to draw a background, that's a problem. And people will give me so many reasons why they need a white background. I've heard it all. And I'm like, why would you deny yourself this incredibly powerful visual storytelling tool? So a lot of this is being willing to confront those weaknesses, because another thing about our website is we have a whole area where you can look at tutorials by topic. And so you could even just come here and just scan all of these different topics and say, okay, well, which one of these have I never done before? I mean, maybe you don't want to be an architect, but maybe you should learn how to do linear perspective and how to sketch a building, and also how to approach architecture with very different materials. So I think this is extremely important that people really take the time to give themselves the opportunity to draw everything. Because I just think if you're trying to rationalize why you don't need to learn how to draw a capybara, that's not a good thing. When you're trying to defend your lack of skill, I think that's a problem.
I think one of the most rewarding experiences for an artist is kind of what you said, is just when you're tasked with drawing something, whether it's for a job or for your own personal work, and you're like, okay, yeah, I got it. No problem. It's just, it's as simple as peeling an orange, or as walking down the street to your favorite grocery store or something like that. Like, it's just a simple thing. And I think that that is an amazing experience when you can have that, and that confidence.
Selena says it's so discouraging to try drawing something different after only drawing one thing for so long, having to relearn something versus bringing all those skills together. Another basic skill, Janice points out, training your eye is probably one of the most important skills of all. You can draw anything. That's a skill it's almost invisible. Why do you think often people equate drawing with only what your hand is doing?
Well, because everything that we're drawing comes from reality. Even if you're making up a new creature, like some sort of creature design that's based on several other things, it's still based on something else. And so being able to study that, being able to understand how machines work, or how animals walk, or how humans move, or just different things like that that are so inherent in our everyday life, it's valuable to have that wealth of knowledge. And there's actually a book by Richard Williams, I believe, called The Animator Survival Kit. And it came out in like the 80s. He basically was the animation director on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And he talked ad nauseum about studying real life. He said, study the ballet dancer, study the art, the construction worker, study the basketball player, study the child walking with its mom. Like, there's so many things that you have to learn from life, and it's incredibly valuable.
It's very funny because when I was in art school, we spent so much time drawing the new figure that when I had to do a portrait commission, I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to paint clothing. That's bad. If you're drawing people, most of the time they do have clothing on. And so there's an example where I just saw a huge gap in my own skill set that was very important at the time. Mistake number 7, learning entirely by yourself. This is related to the feedback, but learning with other people is so much more fun.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, the point of making art if you're not going to show it off to people? So being by yourself as an artist, I don't think is a good thing. The whole point is to share it with the world and let the world give their 2 cents on it or to experience it for themselves. And I think it's very encouraging when you have other people to learn with because they're facing the same struggles as you. And they often find different resources that can help. Like there have been plenty of times where my friends will message me and say, "Hey, Jordan, this is cool for shadow boxers," or "Hey, Jordan, did you know that this artist has this class going on?" Or here's this video to help you understand this. Like it's just a back and forth, constant stream of influence that other people have. I think it's really, really key to my growth personally.
And we're not just talking about critique. Learning with other people, it's about all kinds of things. I learned so much looking at how other people approach the same thing. And we have areas where you can just hang out and just talk to other artists. For example, in general chat, I believe I was talking to people earlier about Hello Kitty, and it just feels so good to talk to people who get it. I really think a lot of the world doesn't understand the mindset or language of being an artist. Have you found that to be the case?
I don't. Wait, can you repeat the question one more time?
That I'll be talking to somebody in another field and they'll just have assumptions about, oh, you're so lucky you're talented, as if I didn't work for this.
I don't know if I've experienced that.
You haven't? Good.
With other artists, no, but with people who don't know art, yes. I think that there's the assumptions like, oh, you got it all figured out, or you're at this level. It's like, thank you, but that's also not true. So that I've experienced many times.
And we have so many opportunities for group learning, everybody, that are free. The Art Dares channel here in the Discord, I see Butter's work. Butter, I believe you're here live in the chat. We have coffee with this awesome cow, and Lisa's doing these acrylic paint experiments. This is where you really can learn from each other. We also have 2500 challenge, which is people doing studies of arms and legs and anatomy. We also have a lot of people participating in our tracks. There's a sequence of video lessons and prompts. But then we also have, if you want more attention from staff, we also have things like our workshops. These are 2-week-long experiences, and you get audio critiques with a 3-hour live session. And these are one of the best places to interact with other people because you're all doing the same thing. You're all working with marker, you're all doing oil painting. And I just find that group context for learning is so important. We also have a comment here. Alexander says, I can speak from experiences on being alone. For the first 20 years, I had no other artists. I got to a point where I wanted to learn more and just got stuck on how to improve. And Angela says, I've grown so much working with the like-minded group in Discord and the courses as well. Thank you, Anna, for the shout out about our workshops. Okay. Mistake number 8, not filling gaps in your learning. We all like to do the things we're good at. It's not fun to do the stuff we're really bad at.
Yeah, this one's particularly convicting even for myself because I have a habit of doing this, despite the experience that I've had. And the challenge with this is it's like the further you progress in the things that you like, there's still going to be major holes in your skill set, and it's only going to show the contrast is going to show more extreme with time. And so if it's very obvious that you can only do one thing, the other things are going to be it's going to be frustrating because you're like, why isn't this at the same level as this? I'm still the same artist. I'm still the same person. What's going on? And it's because the skills have not been balanced. And the only thing I can say to recommend to fix that is simply start learning things all kind of at the same time. Just to have a little here, a little here, a little here, and then you'll see everything kind of level out.
Or you can ignore your weakness for 15 years and start learning it well into your professional life, which is what I did with color. I was so frustrated with color that I felt like it was becoming a waste of time. because I just was so frustrated all the time. I wasn't making any progress. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. And so I deliberately said, I'm not going to use color anymore. And then I came back to it when I started doing that Bread Fairy series. And in retrospect, I guess it was better because I didn't have this thing like hanging over my head that drove me crazy. But when I think about all those years, I could have been using color and I regret that. I wish that I had got the feedback and talked to more people about how to learn color. And it really wasn't until I got a subject matter that really demanded color. I'm not going to paint strawberry jam and make it black and white, obviously. The Bread Fairy makes those scones. But I think confronting your weaknesses, very hard to do, because nobody likes to admit that they're not good at something. It's way more fun to just draw something and feel like it's no effort and it looks great. It's like guaranteed and reliable. But I know I didn't learn linear perspective until I had to teach a class. I agreed to teach the class. I was like, yeah, I could teach the perspective class. And I learned it over the summer. And so the filling the gaps, it never ends. It's the rest of your life.
Yeah. I think the two things that prevent people from filling up those gaps are frustration and fear, usually. And you might be able to condense that into just fear itself because like you said, we don't like doing things that we're not already good at. And I know for me, there's been things that I've tried to do over and over again, and I got so frustrated, I just like my mind couldn't even function properly. And so sometimes you just need to take a break or try and get the outside influences out of your head in order to work properly. And in those situations, if it is that frustrating, maybe just don't show anyone for a little bit and just have it be for you so that you can at least deal with certain things until you're ready to share it.
And you don't have to do it right now. You can say, okay, I know I'm really bad at linear perspective. I'm going to study it for a little bit, take a break, come back to it. You don't have to spend that much time feeling frustrated, because at a certain point, that's not helpful for you just to feel like you're stuck. And sometimes just chopping up that learning, it makes it a little less painful to do the things you're really bad at. And this is such a great comment. Miss Katepo says, for me, it's landscape, like a room in which I don't dare to go in. We have a question here from Anna. I often hear you say you have to choose what you learn, like you say an abstract painter doesn't need anatomy. How do you square that with this idea of filling gaps? That's absolutely true. There are certain things which you really don't need to learn because it's so unrelated to what you're doing. Because anatomy is a ton of work to learn. It takes discipline and time. It's very academic compared to a lot of things. And if you have zero intention of ever drawing a figure, like why would you put yourself through that just because somebody says it's a basic?
Yeah, I think there are some skills that just are not necessary. Like, for example, electricity is necessary in our day-to-day lives. It doesn't mean I need to learn how to become an electrician. Doesn't mean I need to know all the ins and outs of how the panel box works and all that stuff, or plumbing, right? We all need plumbing, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to be a plumber. So I think when it comes to art, you just have to think of it that way. If you're trying to be a concept artist, then maybe ceramics isn't the top choice for you to learn right away. Even I mean, it could be something you want to try, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the top thing that you have to figure out in order for you to be successful.
A reminder to everybody, Jordan is getting married at the end of this month, and I would love for all of you to help me spend a few days extra so I can go to the Los Angeles museums and share with you stuff that is not open to the public. Jordan's website is in the video description below, as well as the link to send me to LA museums. Another reminder, everybody, we do have spaces left in these April and March workshops. We have gesture drawing, crayon. Mia is teaching sparkly painting. I am teaching marker and oil painting, which is coming up fairly soon. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Oh, we also have a Discord chat. Sorry about that. You guys can come hang out with us in the discussion channel. I'm going to show you where that is. So if you guys come over here, it says live streams, and you just pop in here, and I am going to write here, hi, everybody. join us for a live chat. Cool. See you guys next time. Bye.